Millionaire woman asks a poor farmer for help after her car breaks down when she steps into. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into the story. The wind howled through the deserted country road, with only the faint hum of the engine breaking the silence. In the middle of nowhere, a luxury car came to a screeching halt. Behind the wheel was a woman who, at first glance, seemed like she belonged to another world. Dressed in an expensive suit, her hair perfectly styled, and her face marked with a mixture of frustration and worry. Her car, a sleek black vehicle that screamed wealth, had broken down. She tried the ignition a few more times, but the engine refused to start. She sighed in defeat, knowing she was miles away from the nearest town. With a deep breath, she stepped out of the car, her heels sinking slightly into the mud of the gravel road. She looked around, but the landscape was nothing but open fields. There was no one in sight. Her cell phone showed no signal. In that moment, she realized the helplessness of her situation. What could she do now? She needed help. She glanced down the road, and her eyes caught sight of a small farmhouse in the distance. It was her only hope. With a final glance at her car, she walked towards it, hoping that someone would be kind enough to lend a hand. As she approached the farmhouse, she saw a man in the field, a farmer, working under the hot Sunday. He wore simple clothes, his hands rough from years of labor. She hesitated for a moment before calling out to him, her voice shaking slightly. "Excuse me, can you help me? My car broke down." The farmer looked up from his work, squinting against the Sunday. He wiped his brow and nodded, walking towards her. His movements were slow, but purposeful. He didn't seem surprised or bothered by the interruption. When he reached her, he gave a small smile, tipping his hat slightly. "I reckon I can take a look," he said, his voice deep and calm. The woman, still flustered, explained the situation. She had no idea what to do next, but she was grateful for his willingness to help. The farmer knelt down to inspect the car, his rough hands working quickly, demonstrating an ease with tools that was foreign to the woman's high society world. She stood there watching him, feeling a strange mix of gratitude and guilt. She was used to paying for things, but here, in the middle of nowhere, she felt the power of kindness in its purest form. Little did she know, this simple act of help would change both of their lives forever. The woman watched in silence as the farmer knelt beside her car, his hands working with an ease that seemed so natural, it made her feel even more out of place. She had always been surrounded by polished surfaces, professional assistance, and convenience. But here she was, standing on a dirt road, at the mercy of a man whose life was simple yet full of hard-earned wisdom. He had offered his help without hesitation, and she could not help but feel a strange sense of gratitude for this stranger who seemed so familiar with the things she knew little about. The sun beat down on them both, but the man never complained. She watched as he methodically checked the engine, his hands moving over the machine with such confidence that for a moment, she almost believed he could fix anything. "You know, I don't really know much about cars," she said, breaking the silence. "I usually just hire someone to take care of things like this." The farmer glanced up at her, his face expressionless but kind. "Not everyone can afford to hire people for everything," he replied simply, returning his focus to the engine. His words hit her in a way she hadn't expected. She had grown up in a world where money was the answer to everything. But here, in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by vast fields and an old farmhouse, money didn't seem to have much of a place. There was a quiet dignity in the farmer's work that she found both humbling and strange. "You're lucky to know how to do this," she continued, her voice softer now. "I wouldn't have the faintest idea where to start." The farmer didn't answer right away. Instead, he tightened something under the hood, stood up, and wiped his hands on his jeans. "Sometimes, all it takes is a little patience," he said, "and the willingness to get your hands dirty." She chuckled nervously, glancing at her manicured nails. "I guess that's not really my style." The man smiled briefly, but it was more of a knowing smile than one full of amusement. "I reckon you'll get there if you try." The conversation slowed as the farmer continued working, his movements becoming rhythmic and familiar. She found herself watching him more than the car, observing the way he moved with such purpose and calmness. His simplicity was a stark contrast to the bustling world she was used to. She didn't know why, but something about him intrigued her. She had spent so many years surrounded by people who seemed to hide behind their wealth, but this man had nothing but his hands and the land he worked, and yet, he seemed to carry more pride than most of the people she knew. As the minutes passed, the car's engine sputtered to life. The woman could hardly believe it. She had expected a long wait for help, but here she was, ready to go. "You fixed it," she said, her voice filled with surprise. "I can't thank you enough." The farmer gave a small shrug, dusting off his hands. "It's no trouble, just glad to help." She smiled at him, feeling a warmth that went beyond simple gratitude. She didn't know what had come over her, but something in that moment felt significant, as if this encounter was more than just a simple car repair. "You sure you don't want anything in return?" she asked, half joking but still unsure. The man shook his head, his expression remaining stoic. "I'm fine," he replied. "But if you really want to thank me, you could come by sometime. I've got a bit of extra work if you're looking for something to do." She blinked in surprise. "Work?" she repeated, her mind racing. "But I don't know anything about farming." The man smiled slightly, his eyes twinkling with a hint of humor. "You'd be surprised what you can learn when you're willing to try." It wasn't much, but the offer lingered in the air as she climbed back into her car. "Thank you," she said again, the words feeling different this time. "I'll think about it." As she drove off, the image of the farmer stayed with her. She had expected to simply get her car fixed and leave, but somehow, this man had opened up something in her, a reminder of a life that seemed so far away from her own. She didn't know it yet, but this brief encounter would spark a chain of events that would change both their lives forever. The days that followed were filled with uncertainty for both the woman and the farmer. For the woman, whose name was Evelyn, life continued in her high-rise apartment in the city, surrounded by the sound of ringing phones and the busy hum of office life. Yet, her mind kept drifting back to that country road, the dusty fields, and the man who had helped her without hesitation. Despite the chaos of her corporate world, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed within her during that brief encounter. She found herself thinking about him at odd moments when she was in a meeting, when she was walking through the city streets, and especially when she was alone. She realized that, in his simplicity, there was a kind of peace she had never known. Meanwhile, the farmer, whose name was Jack, went about his daily routine without much thought of the encounter. His life had always been simple, waking up at the crack of dawn, tending to his crops, and dealing with the challenges that came with working the land. He had seen many strangers pass through his farm, but Evelyn was different. He had felt a strange connection with her, though he could not quite put his finger on it. Her polite smile, her words of gratitude, had left an impression on him. Yet, as the days passed, he returned to his familiar rhythms, knowing that people like him and people like her rarely crossed paths more than once. But Evelyn couldn't stop thinking about him. The more she tried to push the memory of the encounter away, the more it seemed to resurface, like a nagging thought she couldn't quiet. One afternoon, after finishing a meeting that had drained her, she found herself scrolling through her phone. Without thinking, she typed in the address of the small farmhouse where Jack lived. Her heart raced as she looked at the map, realizing that she was considering driving back to the country. To do what? She wasn't sure. She only knew that the idea of going back there, to that simple life, was calling to her in a way she had never experienced before. She spent the next few days debating with herself, wrestling with the internal tug-of-war between the life she had known and the life she could never quite seem to leave behind. Her decision was made late one evening, when she found herself packing a bag, pulling on her boots, and getting into her car. She didn't know why she was going back to Jack's farm. She didn't know what would happen when she got there, but something inside her told her it was the right thing to do. As she drove, the familiar sights of the city gave way to open fields, vast and uninterrupted. She rolled down the windows, allowing the breeze to wash over her. The air was different here, cleaner, fresher. It was a stark contrast to the smog and noise she was used to. She turned down the dusty road that led to Jack's farm, her heart pounding in her chest. When she pulled up in front of the farmhouse, she saw Jack working in the field again, just as she had left him. He didn't notice her at first, but when he finally looked up, his expression softened. He straightened up from his work, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Didn't expect to see you again," he said, his voice calm but filled with a hint of surprise. Evelyn stepped out of her car, her heart racing. "I couldn't stop thinking about you. About what you said." Jack raised an eyebrow. "What I said?" "About getting your hands dirty," she said, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I think I need to learn how to do that." Jack stood there for a moment, as if weighing her words. He didn't speak right away. Instead, he motioned for her to follow him into the field. "All right," he said finally. "You want to learn? I'll show you." And so, Evelyn began a journey she never expected. She worked beside Jack, learning the ways of the farm. She wasn't very good at it, but she was determined. And with every day that passed, she felt herself growing closer to this man, not just in proximity, but in understanding. She began to see the world differently, to appreciate the simple things she had always overlooked. The sound of the wind through the wheat, the warmth of the sun on her skin, and the feeling of satisfaction that came from a hard day's work. But there was something more happening, something neither of them had anticipated. As they worked together, their connection grew. They shared stories, laughed together, and, over time, learned to trust one another in ways they never thought possible. Evelyn realized that the world she had left behind in the city didn't feel as fulfilling as it once had. The constant meetings, the pressure to succeed at all, seemed so meaningless now. Jack, too, found himself drawn to Evelyn in ways he hadn't expected. She was different from the women he had known, and despite their differences, he couldn't deny the growing feelings he had for her. Little did they both know, their lives were about to change forever. What began as a simple act of kindness on a dusty road was turning into something much more profound, a connection that neither could have imagined. As the days turned into weeks, Evelyn found herself immersed in the rhythm of farm life. The early mornings, the long hours spent under the sun, the hard, physical labor. It was a stark contrast to the cushioned existence she had known in the city. Yet, somehow, it felt more fulfilling. With each passing day, she found herself growing more and more connected to this simple way of life. Jack had become more than just a man who had helped her fix her car. He had become a friend, a mentor, and slowly, something more. The awkwardness between them had faded. They now shared easy conversations, laughter, and the kind of quiet companionship that Evelyn hadn't realized she was missing. But as much as Evelyn had adjusted to life on the farm, she couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that tugged at her every time she thought of her life back in the city. Her phone would buzz with emails from work, and her mind would wander back to the world she had left behind. She had always thought she'd go back, but the longer she stayed on the farm, the harder it was to imagine returning to her old life. One evening, after a long day of harvesting, Evelyn and Jack sat on the porch of his farmhouse, watching the sun set behind the hills. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, and the air was warm and calming. Jack had a glass of iced tea in his hand, and Evelyn held a glass of lemonade. The silence between them was comfortable, not awkward. It was the kind of silence that spoke volumes. "You know, I never thought I'd be sitting here like this," Evelyn said, breaking the silence. "I always thought I'd be back in the city by now." Jack took a sip of his tea and nodded. "I figured you might leave. City life's a hard thing to walk away from." Evelyn turned to him, her expression soft. "It's not that simple, Jack. I thought I was doing the right thing by chasing success, but now, I'm not so sure anymore." Jack set his glass down on the porch railing and turned toward her. "You don't have to make a decision right now. Take your time." Evelyn smiled faintly. "I don't want to leave. I don't want to go back to that life. But I also don't know what this is. What we are." Jack looked at her, his eyes thoughtful. He knew what she was saying, and he wasn't sure what to say in return. He had never been good at expressing his feelings, but there was no mistaking the connection between them. He felt it too. He reached for her hand and squeezed it gently. "Whatever this is, I'm not going anywhere," he said quietly. Evelyn looked down at their joined hands, the roughness of his palm against her softer skin. She felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. It was simple, but it meant everything. They sat there in silence for a while longer, each lost in their thoughts as the sun dipped below the horizon. The world around them was peaceful, and for the first time in a long while, Evelyn felt at peace too. The next few days passed in a blur of work and quiet moments together. Evelyn continued learning from Jack, and their bond deepened. There were still challenges, farming wasn't easy, and there were times when Evelyn felt out of place. But Jack was patient with her, teaching her things she never thought she'd learn. It wasn't just about farming anymore. It was about them, about their growing connection. But as the weeks wore on, Evelyn knew she had to make a decision. She couldn't keep running away from her old life, but she also couldn't ignore what was happening between her and Jack. One morning, after finishing a long day of planting, Jack invited her to sit with him on the porch again. He looked at her, his face serious. "Evelyn, I know you've been thinking a lot about this. I don't want you to feel like you have to stay here because of me. I don't want to put pressure on you. But I do want you to know that whatever decision you make, I'll support you." Evelyn felt her heart race as she looked at him. She had thought about this moment so many times, and now that it was here, she wasn't sure what to say. But she knew one thing for sure. "I don't want to leave, Jack," she said quietly. "I don't want to go back to that life. I found something here that I never thought I'd find." Jack's expression softened, and he took her hand again. "Then stay," he said simply. "Stay, and let's see where this goes." Evelyn smiled, her heart full. It wasn't the life she had planned, but it was the life she wanted. And for the first time in a long time, she was no longer afraid of what the future held. As the days went on, Evelyn's decision to stay on the farm felt more and more like the right one. She had settled into the rhythm of farm life, waking up early, working the fields, and sharing quiet moments with Jack. The connection between them grew stronger each day, and though she was still adjusting to this simpler life, she found peace in it. Jack had become more than just a man she met on a dusty road. He had become her partner, not just in work, but in life. But Evelyn knew there was still a lot to be done. The reality of her choice weighed on her. She had left behind a world of wealth, status, and certainty. She had traded her designer clothes for worn jeans, and the polished world she once knew for the unpredictable life of a farmer. It wasn't an easy adjustment, but with Jack by her side, it felt worth it. One evening, after another long day of work in the fields, Jack and Evelyn sat together on the porch, watching the stars twinkle above. The air was cool and calm, a gentle breeze sweeping through the trees. Evelyn leaned back in her chair, letting the stillness of the night surround her. She hadn't realized how much she had missed the quiet until she found herself here, far from the noisy city. "You know," she said, breaking the silence, "I never thought I'd end up here. But now, I can't imagine leaving." Jack looked over at her, a soft smile playing at the corner of his lips. "You're welcome here as long as you want," he said simply. Evelyn nodded, feeling the weight of his words. She knew he meant them, and that meant more than she could express. She had found something here, something she never thought she would find. Belonging. But despite the sense of peace she had found, Evelyn couldn't help but feel a twinge of doubt every now and then. She had built a life in the city, a career that had brought her prestige and success. But now, in the stillness of the farm, she realized that the things she once valued didn't hold the same weight anymore. One morning, as she worked alongside Jack in the fields, her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a message from her old boss, offering her a promotion in the city. The message was simple, yet it brought a flood of emotions rushing back. She stared at the screen for a moment, her mind torn between two worlds. Jack noticed her hesitation and walked over, sensing something was off. "Everything okay?" he asked gently. Evelyn looked at him, her heart heavy. "It's the city," she said quietly. "They're offering me a job, a big promotion." Jack raised an eyebrow but didn't speak right away. He knew what that meant. The city was calling her back, and he didn't want to stand in her way. "What are you going to do?" he asked softly. Evelyn sighed, looking down at her hands, dirt under her nails. "I don't know. I came here because I wanted something simpler, something real. But that life, it's still there. It hasn't gone anywhere." Jack's eyes softened as he looked at her, understanding the inner struggle she was facing. "You don't have to decide right now," he said. "Take your time." Evelyn appreciated his words. She wasn't sure what the right choice was, but she knew that Jack wasn't trying to influence her decision. He just wanted her to be happy, whatever that meant. Over the next few days, Evelyn couldn't shake the thought of the job offer. She spent her time working the fields with Jack, but her mind was often elsewhere, contemplating the future. The city, with its bright lights and endless opportunities, still had a pull on her. But at night, when she sat on the porch with Jack, the decision seemed easier. This life, with its simplicity and peace, felt like home in a way she hadn't expected. One evening, after a particularly difficult day of work, Evelyn sat on the porch, staring at the setting sun. Jack joined her, his presence calm and steady beside her. She took a deep breath and looked at him. "Jack, I think I've made my decision." He turned to her, his eyes full of curiosity. "What are you going to do?" he asked. Evelyn smiled softly. "I'm going to stay here. I want this. I want you." Jack's heart skipped a beat at her words. He reached for her hand and squeezed it gently. "You don't have to say that for me," he said. "I want you to be sure." Evelyn nodded, her eyes filled with determination. "I'm sure," she said. "This life, with you, it's everything I've been searching for." Jack smiled, his face softening. He leaned over and kissed her gently on the forehead. "Then we'll make this work, together." And with that, Evelyn knew she had made the right choice. The city could offer her a job, but it could never offer her the life she had found here, with Jack. She had finally found her place in the world, and it was here, on the farm, with him. The weeks that followed were filled with a mixture of peace and uncertainty. Evelyn had made her decision to stay on the farm with Jack, but as she settled into her new life, there were moments when doubts crept in. The simplicity of farm life was a stark contrast to the fast-paced, high-stakes world she had once known. There were times when she missed the excitement, the challenges, the constant movement of the city. But then, she would step outside and see Jack working in the fields, his hands covered in dirt, his face weathered from years of labor, and she would remember why she had come here in the first place. Jack, for his part, had accepted her decision with quiet grace. He was a man of few words, but his actions spoke volumes. Every morning, he would wake up before the sun, and Evelyn would follow, learning the routines of the farm. The early mornings, the hard work, the quiet afternoons, they had all become familiar to her now. But despite the peace she had found here, there was still a part of her that longed for something more. As much as she tried to embrace the farm life, Evelyn couldn't ignore the part of her that had once dreamed of success, of making a name for herself in the world. Jack had never asked her to give that up, and he had never pressured her to stay. He had only supported her, every step of the way. But Evelyn felt the weight of her past, the weight of her ambitions, pulling her in two directions. One day, after a long day in the fields, Evelyn sat down on the porch, her feet tired and sore. Jack joined her, as he always did in the evenings, sitting beside her in comfortable silence. The sky was painted with the soft colors of the setting sun, and the sounds of the evening were peaceful, like a lullaby. Evelyn turned to him, her heart heavy with the thoughts that had been swirling in her mind for days. "Jack, I've been thinking a lot," she began, her voice quiet. Jack turned to her, his eyes soft, waiting for her to continue. "I know I said I wanted this life, that I wanted to stay here with you, and I do. But I can't help feeling like there's still a part of me that's unfinished. A part of me that wants more." Jack didn't say anything right away. He simply looked at her, his expression gentle but understanding. Evelyn continued, her words spilling out in a rush. "I'm not sure if I can completely let go of everything I left behind. The city, the career, the life I had before. I don't know if I can just walk away from that." Jack took a deep breath, his gaze never leaving hers. "Evelyn," he said softly, his voice steady, "you don't have to walk away from anything. You don't have to give up who you were to be with me. But you also don't have to go back to something that doesn't make you happy. The choice is yours. You just have to decide what you really want." Evelyn looked down at her hands, her fingers nervously twisting together. She had always been a woman who prided herself on knowing what she wanted, on having a clear vision of her future. But now, in this quiet moment on the porch, she realized that she didn't know. Not anymore. "I don't know what I want, Jack," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want this life with you, but I also feel like I'm giving up something important by staying here. I don't know how to reconcile those two parts of me." Jack's hand gently covered hers, his touch warm and reassuring. You don't have to have all the answers right now. Life's not about having everything figured out. It's about finding what makes you feel alive and following that. Whether it's here or somewhere else, I'll support you. Evelyn looked up at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty and longing. She had always known that Jack was different from the men she had known in the city. He was kind, grounded, and had a way of seeing things that made her feel seen, heard, and understood. In that moment, she realized that, no matter what decision she made, she didn't want to lose him. She took a deep breath and smiled softly. I don't want to lose you either, she said. Jack smiled back, his eyes lighting up with affection. You won't, he said simply. I'm not going anywhere. The silence between them stretched on, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that spoke of understanding, of two people who didn't need words to know that they were on the same page. Evelyn leaned her head against Jack's shoulder, letting the quiet comfort her. She didn't have all the answers yet, but for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she had to. Whatever came next, she knew that she wouldn't be facing it alone. As Evelyn sat beside Jack, the evening sky began to turn from soft shades of pink to deep blues, the air cool and crisp around them. They had spent most of the day in the fields, but now, as the day began to settle into night, a quiet tension lingered between them. Evelyn had been thinking about what Jack had said the choice was hers. She didn't have to figure everything out immediately, but that didn't make the decision any easier. Over the past few weeks, she had grown to love the simplicity of life on the farm, the rhythm of the land, the hard work, and the peace. Yet, the life she had left behind in the city, with its fast-paced energy and endless opportunities, still called to her. She had spent her entire career working towards success, building a life that was all about ambition and status. Now, here, with Jack, she was faced with a different kind of success, one that wasn't measured in promotions or power but in fulfillment and peace. She had never imagined she would be faced with this kind of decision. Jack, sensing her inner turmoil, sat next to her on the porch, his quiet presence offering her the space she needed to process everything. What are you thinking about? He asked, his voice gentle yet probing. Evelyn looked at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. I've been thinking about the city, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. About the life I left behind. It's hard to ignore it, Jack. I spent so many years working towards something, and now I feel like I've just walked away from all of it. I don't know if I can just let that go. Jack was quiet for a moment, letting her words sink in. He had always known that Evelyn's past was not something she could easily forget. It wasn't just about the career or the lifestyle, it was about the identity she had built. He knew she wasn't the kind of person who could live without striving for something, but he also knew that she needed more than just the empty pursuit of success. You don't have to let it go completely, he said slowly, his voice steady. I understand that part of who you are. But you also have to ask yourself, what do you really want? What makes you happy? Evelyn stared out into the darkening landscape, her thoughts swirling. She wanted to be happy. She knew that. But the path to happiness was no longer as clear as it once had been. I want to be here with you, Jack, she said, her voice firm. But there was a hint of doubt in it. But I'm also scared of what that means. What if I stay here and I regret it? What if I can never get back the life I've built? Jack reached out, taking her hand in his touch warm and reassuring. You don't have to decide right now, he said softly. Take your time. If staying here with me is what you want, then we'll make it work. But if you need to go back to the city, I'll understand. I just want you to be sure about what makes you happy. Evelyn turned to face him, searching his eyes for any trace of doubt or resentment. But all she saw was understanding. Jack wasn't trying to hold her back. But he wasn't pushing her to leave either. He was offering her the freedom to choose, and that made her heart ache in a way she hadn't expected. I don't want to leave you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I don't want to lose what we have, but I also don't want to lose myself in the process. Jack gave her hand a gentle squeeze. You won't lose yourself, Evelyn. You're not the same person you were when you left the city. You've changed, and that's okay. Just be true to yourself, and everything else will follow. Evelyn nodded, the weight of his words settling over her. She didn't have all the answers, and she knew that she wouldn't find them overnight. But in that moment, She realized that she didn't need to have everything figured out. What mattered was that she had found something real with Jack. Something that felt like home. They sat in silence for a long time, the only sound the rustling of the leaves in the breeze. Evelyn knew that her decision wasn't going to be easy, but she also knew that whatever path she chose, Jack would be there. And that thought gave her the strength to keep moving forward, one step at a time. As the night grew darker, Evelyn felt a sense of peace settle over her. She didn't have all the answers, but for the first time in a long time, she didn't need to. She was where she was meant to be for now. And that was enough. Days turned into weeks, and Evelyn's decision to stay on the farm seemed more and more like the right one. She had found a sense of peace and belonging she hadn't realized she was missing, but she still couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting for her beyond this quiet life. Despite the deep connection she shared with Jack, Evelyn's thoughts often drifted back to the city, to the fast-paced world she had walked away from. She had never been someone to sit idle. Ambition had always been her driving force. But now, she found herself torn between two worlds, one of peace and fulfillment, the other of success and ambition. Her internal battle continued to churn within her. Jack, as always, was a steady presence by her side. He never pushed her to make a decision, never asked her to choose between him and the life she had left behind. But she could see the quiet understanding in his eyes, a silent acknowledgement that, sooner or later, she would have to come to terms with her own heart. One evening, after another long day of work in the fields, Evelyn sat on the porch, looking out at the horizon. The sky was a mixture of purple and orange as the sun began to set. Jack joined her, taking a seat beside her without saying a word. His company was a comfort, his presence grounding in a way that nothing else had ever been. After a few moments of silence, Evelyn turned to him, her heart heavy with the thoughts she hadn't yet spoken aloud. "Jack," she began, her voice soft. "I think I know what I need to do." Jack didn't look at her right away, but he gave a small nod, his fingers tapping lightly on the armrest. He had always been patient, and he knew that Evelyn needed time to figure things out on her own. "You don't have to rush," he said gently. Evelyn smiled faintly, appreciating his calmness. "I'm not rushing," she said, "but I think I've figured it out. I need to go back to the city, at least for a while." Jack looked at her then, his expression unreadable, but there was no sign of anger or disappointment. "I thought you might say that," he said quietly. "You've always had a lot of dreams, Evelyn." Her heart twisted at his words, but she nodded. "I don't want to leave, Jack. I don't want to leave you. But there's a part of me that needs to try again, to see if I can find a balance between the woman I was in the city and the woman I am now. I don't know if I can ever truly let go of the life I had." Jack reached over and took her hand, his fingers warm against her skin. "I get it," he said. "You don't have to let go of anything. But you also don't have to go back and lose yourself in the process. You can find a way to be both who you were and who you are now." Evelyn felt a sense of relief wash over her, but it was mixed with a pang of sadness. She had thought that going back to the city would mean leaving Jack. But now she realized that wasn't necessarily true. "I don't want to lose what we have," she said, her voice trembling slightly. Jack smiled, his expression tender. "You won't," he assured her. "I'll be here, no matter what. And if you decide to come back here, you'll always have a place with me." His words were simple, but they meant everything to her. They had built something together on this farm, something real and genuine, and it didn't matter where she went, it would always be a part of her. Evelyn squeezed his hand, grateful for his understanding and support. "Thank you, Jack," she said quietly. "I don't know what the future holds, but I know that I want to be true to myself, and I don't want to regret not giving it a try." Jack nodded, his eyes soft. "Just make sure whatever you do, it's for you, not for anyone else." The night fell silent again, but this time, it wasn't filled with tension. It was comfortable, as though they both knew that this was the next step on a path neither could predict but both were willing to take. The decision had been made, but there was no fear in Evelyn's heart anymore. She was ready to go back to the city and face whatever was waiting for her there, but she was also ready to return to the farm whenever she needed to. For now, though, there was peace in the quiet moments they shared, and that peace was enough. As the days passed after their conversation on the porch, Evelyn prepared herself for the journey back to the city. Her heart felt heavy, but at the same time, there was a sense of clarity she hadn't had before. Jack had given her the space to make her decision, and now it was time to take the next step. She still didn't have all the answers, but she knew it was the right choice to go back and see if she could find a balance between the life she had left behind and the life she had built with him. The morning she left, Jack was already out in the fields, as he always was before the sun fully rose. Evelyn had packed her things quietly, unsure of what the goodbye would feel like. She had been avoiding it, but now it was finally here. She didn't want to leave, but she knew she had to. She drove slowly down the dusty road, her thoughts a whirlwind. The farm, Jack's steady presence, had become her home in a way she never expected. The city, with all its noise and rush, felt distant, but she knew she had to confront that part of herself again. She wasn't sure how long she would be gone. A few days, maybe a few weeks, but she knew that this decision was important. As the familiar skyline of the city came into view, Evelyn's heart tightened. She had missed the energy, the speed, but she also felt a pang of longing for the quiet life she had left behind. It was a strange feeling, this pull between two worlds. She had arrived at her apartment in the city late in the evening, the streets alive with the hum of nightlife. Everything felt so different now, faster, louder, more frantic. She had spent years chasing success in this environment, but now, it felt almost foreign to her. She unpacked her things slowly, trying to adjust to the feeling of being back, but the weight of her decision hung over her like a cloud. The next few days were a blur of meetings, calls, and familiar faces. Evelyn went through the motions, but something inside her felt different. She missed the farm, missed Jack, missed the simple peace she had found there. It was as if the city had lost its appeal. She had been so sure before, so focused on climbing the ladder and proving herself, but now it didn't seem as important. She found herself missing the quiet moments with Jack, the way he always seemed to know what to say, the way he never rushed her decisions, the way he made her feel seen without ever asking for anything in return. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day at work, Evelyn found herself staring out the window of her apartment, watching the city lights twinkle below. She realized she had no desire to return to the world she had left behind. The city, once a symbol of success and opportunity, now felt hollow. It wasn't the life she wanted anymore. The pull of the farm, of Jack, was too strong. She missed the simplicity, the sense of purpose that came with each day's hard work. Jack had shown her a life she hadn't known she was looking for, and she knew, deep down, that she was ready to return to it. The next morning, Evelyn packed a small bag and made her way to the train station. She didn't know how long she would stay this time, but she knew that she had to go back. She couldn't live in two worlds anymore, torn between the person she had been and the person she was becoming. She had to choose. As the train pulled out of the station, Evelyn leaned back in her seat and closed her eyes, letting the rhythmic clattering of the tracks soothe her. She thought of Jack, of the farm, of the quiet life that awaited her. She had made the right decision. The city could offer her success, but it could never offer her the peace and fulfillment she had found with Jack. The train ride felt like an eternity, but it also felt like the beginning of something new. She didn't know exactly what the future held, but she knew she was ready for it. When the train finally arrived at the small station near the farm, Evelyn stepped off onto the platform, the familiar air of the countryside greeting her. She took a deep breath and walked toward the farm, her heart beating faster with each step. Jack was in the fields when she arrived, just as she had imagined. She walked toward him, her heart pounding in her chest. When he saw her, his face broke into a smile, and she couldn't help but smile back. He didn't say anything at first. He just reached for her hand and held it tightly. It was all the words they needed. She was home. As Evelyn stood there, her hand tightly held in Jack's, she realized that coming back to the farm was more than just a physical return, it was a return to herself. The train ride had given her time to think, to reflect on everything she had left behind and everything she had gained since coming to this quiet place. The city had felt so far away now, as though it was a distant memory, and the world she had created with Jack, in the fields and on the porch, felt like home. She took a deep breath, the fresh country air filling her lungs, grounding her in this new reality. Jack gave her a small, reassuring smile, his eyes soft but full of warmth, as if he had known she would come back all along. Without a word, he led her to the barn, where the sounds of animals and the soft creak of the barn door welcomed them. The farm had always felt like a sanctuary, a place where time slowed down, and where she could escape the pressures of the outside world. But this time, everything felt different. She was no longer escaping, she was embracing this life. They spent the next few days working side by side, falling into a routine that felt both familiar and new. Jack never asked her to explain why she had returned, and Evelyn didn't need to. Her decision was clear, and every moment spent working alongside him, planting crops, feeding the animals, or fixing things around the farm, only reaffirmed that she had made the right choice. There were no grand gestures, no dramatic declarations. The quiet comfort of their shared life spoke louder than words ever could. However, Evelyn couldn't help but notice the way Jack seemed to observe her from time to time, as though he was waiting for something. She wasn't sure what, but she felt it, a soft curiosity in his gaze, like he was trying to figure out something about her, or perhaps about himself. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the hills, casting long shadows across the field, Jack broke the silence. They had finished their chores for the day and sat on the porch, watching the sky turn golden. "Evelyn," Jack said, his voice low but steady. She turned to him, her heart fluttering slightly at the sound of her name. "I've been thinking," he continued, his eyes meeting hers with a quiet intensity. "I want to be sure we're both making the right choices. Not just for us, but for our future." Evelyn felt a knot tighten in her chest. She had known this conversation was coming, but it didn't make it any easier. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice soft but curious. Jack took a deep breath, his gaze moving to the fields beyond them. "You came back to the farm, but I know it's not easy to leave everything behind. I don't want you to feel like you have to stay here with me just because you think you owe it to me, or because you don't have another choice." Evelyn felt her heart race at his words. She knew that Jack was trying to be considerate, but it made her wonder if he doubted her feelings for him. "I'm not here because I think I owe you anything," she said, her voice firm. "I'm here because I want to be. I want this life with you. I want the farm. I want the simplicity. And I want you." Jack looked at her then, a flicker of relief in his eyes. He nodded slowly, as if her words had confirmed something he had been unsure about. "I just want you to be sure," he said quietly. "I want you to feel free to make your own choices, Evelyn. I want you to be happy." The tenderness in his voice made her heart swell. She reached out and took his hand, squeezing it gently. "I am happy, Jack," she said, her voice full of conviction. "For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Jack smiled softly, his hand tightening around hers. They sat in silence for a while, the only sound the gentle rustling of the leaves in the wind. Evelyn's heart was full, her mind clear. She didn't have to have everything figured out. She didn't need to know what the future held. All she knew was that in this moment, with Jack beside her and the quiet of the farm around them, she was exactly where she was meant to be, and that was enough. As the evening wore on, and the stars began to twinkle above, Evelyn realized that she no longer needed to reconcile the two worlds she had once been torn between. She had found her place in the world, and it was here, with Jack, on the farm. The simplicity, the peace, and the love they shared had given her more than she had ever imagined. And she knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning of the life they would build together. As the weeks passed, Evelyn and Jack settled into a peaceful routine. The farm had become more than just a place to live. It had become their home, filled with the rhythm of daily chores, laughter, and quiet moments together. Jack had been right when he said that Evelyn didn't have to make a decision right away. She didn't have to have all the answers. The clarity she had been seeking came slowly, but it was here now, in the simplicity of their shared life. Still, Evelyn couldn't help but feel a tug in her heart as time went on. There were moments when the weight of her past, her career, her ambition, the city felt distant, but it was always there, like a shadow in the corner of her mind. She knew that Jack understood her struggles, but sometimes she wondered if she was asking too much from him. Would he still want her if she could never fully escape her past? The thought lingered as the days went by, but she pushed it aside, choosing to focus on the life they were building together. The farm was thriving, and so was their relationship. They worked hard, side by side, and every task, no matter how small, felt like an accomplishment they shared. One morning, after a long day of harvesting the crops, Jack surprised her with a simple gesture. He handed her a worn-out notebook, its pages filled with sketches and notes. Evelyn raised an eyebrow, confused. "What's this?" she asked. Jack smiled, his eyes soft. "Something I've been working on. I wanted to share it with you." Evelyn opened the notebook, flipping through the pages. There, she saw detailed sketches of the farm, of the crops they were growing, of the barn, and of the quiet, peaceful landscape that had become their life. She was moved by the effort Jack had put into capturing the world they had created together. It wasn't just the sketches that touched her, it was the way Jack had captured the essence of their life, of their love for this place. He had never been one for words, but this was his way of expressing what he couldn't say. Evelyn felt a lump in her throat as she looked at him. "Jack," she whispered, her voice trembling, "this is beautiful." Jack shrugged, a slight blush on his cheeks. "I thought it might be a good way to remember all of this." Evelyn closed the notebook gently and reached for his hand. "We don't need to remember it. We're living it." Jack's smile deepened, and in that moment, Evelyn realized that she had found everything she needed. The life they were building together wasn't about grand gestures or flashy accomplishments. It was about the quiet, everyday moments that added up to something real and lasting. But as Evelyn settled into this peaceful life, a new challenge arose, one she hadn't anticipated. One afternoon, a letter arrived for her. It was from her old company in the city, an invitation to a prestigious gala where she would be recognized for her work. Evelyn felt a flutter of unease in her stomach as she opened the envelope. The city was calling her back, just as she had feared. The recognition, the success, the opportunity, it all seemed so tempting. It was the life she had worked for, the life she had left behind. But as she stared at the invitation, Evelyn realized that it didn't hold the same weight it once had. She didn't need the validation anymore. What she had here, with Jack, was real. It was something that couldn't be measured by awards or status. She had found her own worth in the simple, everyday life they shared. Evelyn placed the letter back in the envelope, a decision forming in her mind. She didn't need to go back to the city. She didn't need to chase after the things she had once thought were important. What mattered now was the life she had here, on the farm, with Jack. The next morning, she handed the invitation to Jack, her heart calm and steady. "I'm not going," she said quietly. Jack looked up from his work, surprised. "Not going? But it's a big deal, Evelyn." Evelyn smiled, shaking her head. "It doesn't matter. I've already got everything I need right here." Jack walked over to her, his eyes filled with understanding. "Are you sure?" he asked softly. "I'm sure," Evelyn replied, her voice full of certainty. "This is where I belong now." Jack smiled, his hand reaching out to gently touch her cheek. "Then I'm glad you're here." Evelyn kissed him softly on the lips, the weight of her decision lifting from her shoulders. She had made the right choice. This was the life she had always been meant to live. As they stood there, holding each other, Evelyn knew that the future was full of uncertainty. But she also knew that as long as they had each other, they could face anything. And in that moment, with the farm stretching out before them, Evelyn felt a sense of peace she had never known before. As the months passed, Evelyn and Jack's life together on the farm grew richer and more fulfilling. They worked side by side, and although the challenges of farm life were never easy, they faced them with determination and unity. Every morning, as the sun rose over the fields, they began their day with shared tasks, each moment feeling more natural than the last. The farm had become a part of them both, a reflection of their hard work, their dreams, and their love for each other. Evelyn had never imagined that such a simple life could bring her so much happiness. She had once believed that success was measured by wealth, status, and accomplishment, but now she understood that the true measure of success was the contentment she felt in her heart. Jack never pushed her to be anything other than herself. He never asked her to leave behind the dreams she had once pursued in the city, but he had shown her that there was more to life than climbing a ladder. Jack had always been grounded, with a deep connection to the land and a quiet wisdom that Evelyn had come to rely on. They shared a peace that neither of them had known before, and each day, their bond grew stronger. But Evelyn had yet to let go completely. There were still moments when the shadows of her past life lingered, especially when she saw old friends or colleagues in the nearby town. One afternoon, Evelyn went to the small market to pick up supplies for the farm. As she walked through the aisles, a familiar face caught her eye. It was Claire, one of her old colleagues from the city. Evelyn's heart skipped a beat. Claire smiled when she saw her, walking over with a surprised but warm expression. "Evelyn? I didn't expect to see you here," Claire said. Evelyn smiled back, but there was a knot in her stomach. "It's been a while," she said, her voice a little unsure. Claire looked at her with genuine curiosity. "How have you been? We all missed you back at the office. I heard you left, but no one really knew why. You disappeared so suddenly." Evelyn hesitated, unsure of how to explain the changes in her life. The world she had once belonged to seemed so distant now, almost like it belonged to someone else. "I've been good," she said, her words measured. "I'm actually living on a farm now. It's different, but I love it." Claire's eyebrows rose, clearly intrigued. "A farm? Wow, that's a big change. From the city to the countryside. You always seemed so focused on your career. I didn't expect you to leave it all behind." Evelyn felt a pang in her chest. She had worked so hard to build her career, to be seen as successful, but now it felt like an unfamiliar world. "I didn't expect it either," she admitted. "But I found something here that I never knew I was looking for." Claire smiled, but Evelyn could see the skepticism in her eyes. "I can't imagine leaving everything behind. The city's where it's at, you know?" Evelyn's smile faltered slightly. "I thought so too, once," she said softly. Claire didn't seem to notice the change in her tone. "Well, I'm glad you're happy. I just thought I'd run into you again soon, back in the office or something. We've been doing a lot of exciting projects lately, and I'm sure you'd love to be a part of them." Evelyn felt the familiar pull of the city again, the temptation to go back to what she knew, to return to the world where she had always felt validated. But as she looked at Claire, she realized how far she had come. The person Claire was talking about wasn't her anymore. She had changed. "I think I've found what I need here," Evelyn said, her voice steady. Claire gave her a puzzled look but nodded. "Well, if you ever change your mind, the door's always open. I'm sure the city's got plenty to offer if you ever want to go back." Evelyn smiled, but this time it was with a certainty she had never had before. "Thanks, Claire, but I'm where I'm meant to be now." As she walked away, Evelyn felt a sense of peace settle in her heart. It wasn't that she didn't appreciate the life she had once lived or the people she had worked with, but she had found something deeper, something that didn't require validation or success. She had found a life with Jack, one that was filled with meaning and purpose. And as she made her way back to the farm, to the life she had built with him, Evelyn knew that this was the place where she truly belonged. She didn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. She had already found her success, and it was more than she had ever imagined. The farm, Jack's steady love, and the quiet joy of everyday life were all the rewards she needed. And with that realization, Evelyn felt free in a way she never had before. As the seasons changed, so did the life Evelyn and Jack had built together on the farm. What had begun as a simple return to a peaceful life had transformed into something deeper, something stronger. The farm, once a place of uncertainty for Evelyn, had become her home, a place where she truly understood the meaning of belonging. Jack had always known what was important: hard work, simplicity, love, and in time, Evelyn had come to see the world the way he did. The farm wasn't just a patch of land. It was a symbol of everything they had created together. The quiet mornings spent in the fields, the evenings on the porch watching the sunset, the laughter shared in the barn, it all filled Evelyn's heart in a way she never imagined. She had learned to appreciate the slow pace, the sense of purpose in every task, and the connection with Jack that deepened every day. But the past was never entirely behind her. Every now and then, when the world seemed still and everything felt right, Evelyn would think about the life she had left behind in the city. It wasn't regret, it was more of a recognition of how far she had come. The city had shaped her, and the life she had lived there was a part of her. But she was no longer the same person. She had grown, and the life she had built on the farm was now the one that mattered. One afternoon, as they sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, Jack turned to her, his eyes soft with affection. "You ever think about the city anymore?" he asked, his voice gentle but curious. Evelyn smiled and shook her head. "Not much," she said. I think about it sometimes, but it feels like a lifetime ago. I think I've found my place now, Jack. Here, with you. Jack smiled, a look of quiet satisfaction in his eyes. He had always believed that the simple life was the most fulfilling, but hearing Evelyn say those words made him feel as though their journey together had been worth every struggle. It was the kind of peace he had always wanted for both of them. Over time, they became an inseparable part of the small community around the farm. They were known for their hard work, their kindness, and the love they shared for the land. People from the nearby town often stopped by, whether it was to buy fresh produce, help with a project, or simply share a meal. It was a life filled with connection, not just to each other, but to the world around them. And Evelyn, once a woman who had chased ambition and success in the city, now found joy in the simple moments of life. One evening, after a long day of work, Jack sat beside her on the porch, his hand resting gently on hers. The stars above were clear and bright, and the air was cool and crisp. Evelyn leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "I never thought I'd be here," she said softly. Jack turned to her, his expression warm. "And yet, here you are," he said with a smile. "This is where you're meant to be." Evelyn closed her eyes, letting the peacefulness of the moment wash over her. There were no grand gestures, no accolades, no world-changing achievements. But there was something better, a life that was simple, real, and full of love. She had found the kind of success she had been searching for all along, not in the city, not in the accolades, but in the quiet, everyday moments she shared with Jack. In that moment, Evelyn knew that she had found everything she had ever needed. Not in the life she had left behind, but in the life she had chosen. With Jack, on the farm, she had found her true home, and she knew, without a doubt, that this was only the beginning of the life they would continue to build together, filled with love, peace, and the promise of tomorrow. In this heartwarming story, a woman who once lived a fast-paced, high-powered life in the city finds herself returning to the simple life on a farm after a chance encounter with a kind-hearted farmer. As she navigates her journey between two very different worlds, she discovers that true success isn't measured by wealth or status, but by finding peace, love, and belonging. This tale, part of the genre of millionaire stories, shows the transformative power of embracing a new way of life, stepping away from the pressures of the city to find fulfillment in the quiet moments of rural life. Throughout the story, we witness the evolving relationship between the woman and the farmer as they work together, build a life, and ultimately redefine what it means to be truly successful. The story of Evelyn's journey is one of self-discovery, where she realizes that the luxury and ambition she once pursued in the city cannot compare to the peace she finds on the farm with Jack. As the two of them grow closer, Evelyn learns to appreciate the beauty of simplicity, making this one of the most inspiring millionaire stories you'll ever hear. It's a tale that reminds us that happiness doesn't always come from wealth and status, but from the connections we make, the hard work we put in, and the love we share. These millionaire stories are not just about money, they're about finding the true meaning of life. As Evelyn comes to terms with her choice to stay on the farm, she is reminded of what truly matters, and her life becomes an example of how the richest moments are those filled with love, peace, and purpose, far beyond anything her past life could offer. If you love uplifting and transformative millionaire stories, this one will stay with you long after the story ends.